I signed away 7 years of my life with one pen. That's what it felt like anyway. I was standing in a lawyer's office, staring at a document that said my business partner owned everything. Everything I built. Everything I sacrificed for. And he was smiling at me like he'd already won. He hadn't. Stick around, because this story still gives me chills. And by the end, you're going to understand exactly why I never, ever trust a handshake again. Okay, let me back up. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is what happened to me because honestly, I think a lot of you have been here too. Maybe not with millions of dollars. Maybe with a lot less. But that feeling? Of being betrayed by someone you trusted with your future? Yeah, I think you know that feeling. So here's how it started. 8 years ago, I was 26 years old, broke, living in a one-bedroom apartment with my sister because I couldn't afford rent on my own. I had a degree I wasn't using and a head full of ideas nobody wanted to fund. I'd been working a 9-to-5 in logistics, moving boxes on paper instead of moving them in real life, and every single day I felt like I was dying a little bit inside. You know that feeling? Where you clock in and you can already feel your soul leaving your body. That was me. But I had this idea. A supply chain software idea. Something that would help small trucking companies manage their routes without paying for the expensive enterprise systems the big guys used. I know it sounds boring. But trust me, it wasn't boring to me. It was everything. I didn't have money to build it myself. I didn't have coding skills. I had passion and a notebook full of sketches and spreadsheets I made at 2 a.m. after my sister went to bed. That's when I met him. I'm going to call him Mark in this story. Not his real name, obviously for legal reasons, but also because honestly, I don't want to give him the satisfaction of hearing his real name in a video that's about how he lost. Mark was everything I wasn't. Confident. Loud. Great with people. He'd built 2 failed startups before, but he talked about those failures like they were badges of honor, like Silicon Valley success stories waiting to happen. I met him at a small business networking event that I almost didn't go to. I remember standing in the corner with a cup of bad coffee, not talking to anyone, and he walked up to me and said, "You look like someone who has an idea nobody's funding." I laughed. I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because that's exactly how I looked 3 years ago." We talked for 2 hours that night. And by the end of it, he said the words that changed my life. "Let's build this together. I'll bring the capital and the connections. You bring the vision. 50-50. 50-50. I want you to remember those words, because they're going to matter a lot later in this story. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have anyone to check this deal for me. I was 26, desperate, exhausted from a job that was crushing me. And here was a guy telling me he believed in my dream enough to bet real money on it. We shook hands. We didn't even sign anything for the first 4 months. Looking back now, I want to reach through time and shake myself by the shoulders. But back then, it felt like fate. It felt like the universe had finally sent me a break. You might be wondering how someone smart enough to build a company could be dumb enough to not get anything in writing. Honestly, I ask myself that question all the time. But when you're drowning and someone throws you a rope, you don't stop to check if the rope has a hook on the other end. We started building. I quit my job 3 months in. That was terrifying, by the way. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot of my old job after my last day, just crying. Not sad tears. Scared tears. The kind where your whole body shakes because you just jumped off a cliff and you don't know if there's water underneath you. Mark put in the first round of funding. $50,000 from his savings, plus some money from an old business contact of his. I worked 18-hour days. I taught myself basic coding just so I could understand what our developers were building. I slept on a couch in our tiny rented office more nights than I slept in my own bed. For the first year, it actually felt like a partnership. We fought, sure, but we fought like people who both cared. He'd push back on my ideas, I'd push back on his, and somehow we'd land somewhere better than where either of us started. I actually trusted him. I want to say that clearly, because it's going to matter. I didn't just tolerate him. I trusted him. He came to my mom's birthday dinner. I helped him move apartments. We weren't just business partners. I thought we were friends. By year 2, we finally signed an official partnership agreement. 50-50 ownership, on paper this time. I remember feeling relieved when we signed it. Like finally, it's official. Finally, I'm protected. I had no idea how wrong I was about that word. Protected. Things started changing in year 3. Our software started actually working. I mean really working. We landed our first major client, a regional trucking company with about 200 trucks. Then another. Then another. By the end of year 3, we had 11 companies using our platform, and for the first time we were profitable. Not rich, but profitable. Real money coming in every month. And that's exactly when Mark started changing. It was small things at first. He started taking meetings without me. He said it was just introductory calls, nothing important. He started using words like, my company instead of our company, in emails to investors. I noticed it, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself, this is my partner, my friend. He wouldn't do that to me. I want to pause here and just say something directly to you if you're watching this and going through something similar right now. That voice in your head that notices small red flags? Listen to it. I didn't, and it cost me almost everything. By year 4, we brought on an actual investor. A venture capital firm put in $1.2 million for a piece of the company. This should have been the best day of my life. I remember popping a cheap bottle of champagne in our office, laughing, actually crying a little because I couldn't believe how far we'd come from that guy sketching ideas in a notebook at 2 a.m. But something felt off about the paperwork from that deal. I didn't understand it fully at the time. I was so excited, so trusting, that I didn't read every single clause the way I should have. Mark told me, don't worry about the fine print, our lawyer handled it, it's standard stuff. Our lawyer. Except it wasn't our lawyer. It was his lawyer. A guy Mark had known for years, someone I'd met maybe twice. I didn't think much of it then. Now I understand exactly what was happening. Piece by piece, document by document, Mark was restructuring the company in a way that diluted my ownership and gave him more control. It's called a restructuring for investment purposes. That's the phrase they used. Sounds harmless, right? It's not harmless. It's a weapon, if you don't know how to read it. By the middle of year 4, I started noticing that decisions were being made without me. Big decisions. Hiring decisions. Financial decisions. I'd walk into the office and find out we'd hired someone new, someone I never interviewed, someone I never even met until their first day. I confronted Mark about it. I remember that conversation so clearly. We were in his office and I said, why do I feel like I'm being pushed out of my own company? He laughed. He actually laughed and said, you're being dramatic. This is growth. Companies change. You need to trust the process. Trust the process. I think about those words a lot. Because that phrase, trust the process, is what people say right before they take something from you. 6 months later, everything came out. I was doing a routine review of our financial documents, something I honestly should have been doing every month, but I'd gotten complacent because I trusted him. And I found it. A restructuring document from over a year earlier that changed the ownership split from 50-50 to 70-30 in his favor. My signature was on it. I want you to sit with that for a second. My signature. On a document reducing my ownership by 20% of a company that, by that point, was valued at close to $8 million. I did not remember signing that document. I went back through my emails, my old files, everything I could find, trying to figure out how this happened. And then I remembered. There had been a stack of papers Mark asked me to sign during a chaotic week when we were closing the investor deal. He told me they were just standard onboarding forms for the new investor, nothing important, just formalities. I was exhausted. We were closing on a huge deal. I trusted him completely, and I signed a whole stack of documents without reading every single page. One of those pages was the restructuring agreement. I confronted him immediately. I remember my hands were shaking when I called him. He didn't even deny it. He said, and I will never forget these exact words, he said. You should have read what you were signing. That's on you, not me. That's on you, not me. 7 years of my life. 18-hour days. Missed holidays. a relationship I lost because I never had time for anyone outside the company. My entire 20s, basically. And he looked me in the eye and told me it was my fault for trusting him. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that conversation. I'm not exaggerating. I lay in bed every night just replaying every conversation, every meeting, every moment where I should have caught this. I felt so stupid. I felt humiliated. I remember calling my sister at 3 a.m., crying so hard I could barely get words out, and she just kept saying, "Breathe. Just breathe. We'll figure this out." I want to be honest with you about something else too. During this period, I genuinely considered walking away, just taking whatever small piece I had left and disappearing, starting over somewhere else. The thought of fighting a guy with more money, better lawyers, and zero conscience, it terrified me. I felt so small. I felt like nobody would believe me, because on paper, it looked clean. It looked like I signed away my rights willingly. You might be wondering, why not just accept it and move on? Believe me, I asked myself that same question at 4 a.m. more nights than I can count. But something in me refused to let it go. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was 7 years of my life screaming at me that this wasn't right. Whatever it was, it wouldn't let me sleep, and it wouldn't let me quit. The turning point for me happened in a laundromat. I know, that sounds like such a strange, small detail to include in a story about millions of dollars, but it's true, and it's exactly why I'm telling you. I was doing laundry, sitting on a plastic chair, completely emotionally drained, scrolling through my phone just to distract myself. And I saw a post from an old college friend who had become a business litigation lawyer. I hadn't talked to her in years, but something told me to message her. I typed out this long, messy message explaining everything. The partnership, the signature, the restructuring document, all of it. I almost didn't send it because I felt embarrassed. I felt like such a failure for letting this happen to me. I sent it anyway. She called me 20 minutes later, and the first thing she said was, "Don't sign anything else. Don't respond to him in writing until we talk properly. And send me every document you have tonight." That phone call changed everything. She explained something to me that I didn't fully understand before. Just because I signed something doesn't automatically mean it's legally valid or enforceable. There's a concept called fraudulent inducement, which basically means if someone deceives you into signing a document by misrepresenting what it is, that signature can potentially be challenged in court. She also explained that the way the documents were bundled together, presented under time pressure, without independent legal counsel representing my interests, that mattered a lot. I remember sitting in that laundromat, and just feeling this tiny spark of hope for the first time in weeks. Not certainty. Not confidence that I'd win. Just hope that maybe this wasn't over. I hired her firm. It cost me almost every dollar of savings I had left, which honestly wasn't much because most of my money had gone right back into the company over the years. I remember having an actual conversation with myself in the mirror, asking, "Are you really going to fight for this? Are you really going to risk everything you have left on a legal battle against someone with more resources than you?" I decided yes. Because the alternative was living the rest of my life knowing I let someone steal 7 years of my work, and just said nothing. The next 8 months were, honestly, some of the hardest of my entire life. Harder than the 18-hour workdays. Harder than sleeping on that office couch. Because this wasn't just physically exhausting, it was emotionally exhausting in a completely different way. We filed a lawsuit. Breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent inducement, and a few other claims I won't bore you with the legal terminology of. Mark's lawyers responded aggressively. They tried to paint me as someone who was simply unhappy with a legitimate business decision. Someone trying to extort money after willingly signing legal documents. There were depositions. I sat in a room for 6 hours while Mark's lawyer tried to twist every single word I said. I remember him asking me the same question 15 different ways, trying to get me to slip up, trying to get me to say something that contradicted myself. I remember going home after that deposition and just sitting in my car in the driveway for an hour, not able to move, just staring at nothing. There were moments during this process where I genuinely thought I was going to lose. My lawyer was honest with me about that. She told me lawsuits like this can go either way, that juries and judges are unpredictable, that even strong cases sometimes lose. I remember asking her one night, "What happens if we lose? What happens to me?" She didn't sugarcoat it. She said, "You'll have spent a lot of money, and you might have to accept the reduced ownership permanently." I want to be really honest with you. There was a night, about 5 months into the lawsuit, where I almost called Mark and told him I'd settle for whatever he offered, just to make the pain stop. I was that exhausted. I was that broken down. I actually had my phone in my hand, his number pulled up. I didn't call, and I think that's the moment I actually changed as a person. Not the courtroom win. Not the moment I found out the verdict. That night, sitting alone with the phone in my hand, deciding to put it down instead of giving up, that was the real turning point. The trial itself took 11 days. I'm not going to walk you through every single legal detail, because honestly some of it was so dense even I struggled to follow along in real time. But I want to tell you about the moments that mattered. My lawyer built the case around a simple idea: trust. She showed the jury step by step how our partnership started with a handshake and grew based on mutual trust, how that trust was documented in years of emails where Mark referred to me as an equal partner, praised my contributions, called our company our baby, in messages to investors. And then she showed them the shift, the restructuring document, the pattern of decisions made without my knowledge, the bundled paperwork signed under pressure during a chaotic, high-stress week. Mark's lawyers argued that business is business, that I was a grown adult who signed legal documents, and that buyer's remorse isn't a legal claim. I remember sitting there listening to that argument and feeling this hot anger rise up in my chest, because it made 7 years of my life sound like a bad Amazon purchase I regretted. But here's the thing that I think really turned the case. My lawyer brought in a forensic document examiner who testified about the specific circumstances of that signing day. Text messages between me and Mark from that week were entered as evidence, where Mark literally wrote, quote, "Just sign the stack, it's all routine stuff for the investor. Don't worry about reading every page, I already checked it." That message existed because I had saved every text conversation with Mark going back years, mostly just out of habit, not strategy. I never imagined those old messages would end up being some of the most important evidence in my entire life. When that message was read out loud in the courtroom, I looked over at Mark, and for the first time in almost a year, I saw something on his face that wasn't confidence. It was fear. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 of the longest days of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep properly. My sister flew in just to sit with me during those 2 days, because she knew I couldn't be alone. When the verdict came in, I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. The jury found in my favor. They ruled that the restructuring agreement was invalid due to fraudulent inducement. The original 50-50 ownership was restored. And beyond that, the jury awarded damages for the years of profits I should have received under the correct ownership split, plus punitive damages because the jury found that Mark's conduct was, in their words, deliberate and in bad faith. The total judgment came out to just over $4.3 million. I want to tell you what that moment actually felt like, because it wasn't what I expected. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Like I'd feel like standing up and shouting. Instead, I just started crying. Quiet crying. My lawyer put her hand on my shoulder, and all I could think about was that 26-year-old version of me, sitting in her car after quitting her job, terrified and hopeful at the same time. I wished I could go back and tell her, "It's going to be hard. It's going to be so much harder than you think. But you're going to make it." Mark's company appealed the decision, which honestly didn't surprise me. The appeal process took another 14 months. 14 more months of uncertainty, of waiting, of not fully being able to move on with my life because this was still hanging over me. But the appellate court upheld the original verdict, agreeing that the evidence of fraudulent inducement was, quote, "clear and substantial." It's been almost 2 years since that final ruling. I want to be really honest with you about something. Winning that case didn't magically fix everything. I know that's not the ending you probably expected from a video with a title like this one. I lost 7 years of relationships outside of work. I lost my 20s, in a way, to a company that almost got stolen from me. I developed genuine anxiety around signing documents, any documents, even simple things like apartment leases. I still, to this day, read every single line of every contract 3 times before I sign anything. My hands still get a little shaky sometimes when a lawyer hands me a stack of papers, even now. But I also learned things that I wouldn't trade for anything. I learned that trust without protection isn't trust, it's just hope with extra steps. I learned that the people who talk the most about trusting the process are often the ones benefiting most from you not questioning that process. I learned that saving old text messages, old emails, old documents, that habit that used to feel paranoid to me, actually saved my entire future. And maybe most importantly, I learned that I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. That night in my driveway after the deposition, when I could barely move, I didn't know it then, but that was me building the exact strength I'd need 8 months later to sit in a courtroom and not fall apart. If you're going through something similar right now, and I know some of you are, because the comments on stories like this always prove that, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not stupid for trusting someone. You are not weak for being deceived. Manipulation works precisely because it targets good, trusting people. That's not a flaw in you. That's actually evidence of your character. But please document everything. Get everything in writing. Never sign a stack of papers without reading every single page. Even if the person handing them to you is your best friend, your family member, your business partner, whoever. Especially then, honestly, because the people closest to us are the ones with the most opportunity to hurt us. I started my own company again after the settlement, by the way. Completely on my own this time. No partners. It's smaller than what Mark and I built together, but every single piece of it is mine, and I sleep better at night than I did during any of those successful years with him. I think about that laundromat a lot. It's strange, the moments that end up changing your life. Not the big dramatic ones you'd expect. Not the courtroom, not the verdict. A plastic chair in a laundromat, a half-typed message I almost didn't send, and a friend who picked up the phone. If there's one thing I want you to take from this video, it's this. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, even if you can't explain exactly why, even if everyone around you says you're overreacting, please listen to that feeling. I ignored mine for almost 2 years. I don't want you to make that same mistake. And if you're in the middle of your own fight right now, whatever that fight looks like for you, a business partner, a family member, a relationship, a legal battle, anything, I want you to know something. The version of you on the other side of this is stronger than you can imagine right now. I promise you that. I lived it. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It wasn't easy for me, and I don't think it'll be easy for you either. But easy was never really the point. Surviving it, and coming out the other side still standing, still yourself, that's the point. If this story meant something to you, if any part of it felt familiar, I'd really love to hear about it in the comments. Sometimes just writing it out, telling someone, even strangers on the internet, that's the first step toward actually dealing with it. I know it was for me. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, real stories, real struggles, real people who came out the other side, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. And read the fine print.